So I'm really honored that this is the first time I'm going to make remarks as the executive director of Bioneers. Some of you may have seen me on the stages of Bioneers in 2011. That was my very first time as a keynote speaker here, and I'm really honored. First of all, I want to thank Brock and Dean and Kenny and Nina, and really to thank all of you Bioneers and to wish you a happy Bioneers 28th birthday. Wow, almost 30, thinking about it. I'm so thankful to have the opportunity to return to you in my 4th year now as executive director of Bioneers. I like to call myself the forever new executive director. In fact, a member of our community just a couple months ago introduced me as the new executive director of Bioneers. I thought, I'll keep that, I like it. But as we know, Bioneers have been gathering, we've been gathering, many people have been gathering for 28 years since Kenny and Nina launched this remarkable movement of movements, this network of networks. And the guiding principle was to reveal to the world the most promising solutions to humanity's most pressing problems and to help propel those solutions forward. And we gather together every year to sort of refill that cup, if you will. And of course, we continue to do this noble work, but sometimes those crises, which frequently cause devastation in many parts of the world, hit very close to home. And as Brock mentioned, this one was nearly a direct hit. And it struck quite a few of our friends, family, staff, presenters. My family members were struck by it. And they were directly impacted by the fires that ravaged Northern California. So, in fact, a few days ago, even, the exhibit hall, where so much of the Bioneers is going to be convened, was home to several hundred evacuees. And we were ready to welcome them into Bioneers and have name badges for them. And that's really part of the radically inclusive part of the community. So let me offer, before proceeding any further, my deepest condolences to those of you in the audience, in the community at large, whose lives were disrupted, who lost family, who lost lives and homes because of these fires. We don't yet know the immediate cause of the fires, but we do know that climate disruption and our land use patterns have definitely contributed to making the wildfires and the flooding and the storm events even more destructive. And that's something we've been witnessing these past few months. Some of what we'll be discussing over the coming days is how we as a species can use the best tools of science and innovative, nature-honoring design in combination with the profound ecological wisdom of the original inhabitants of this land to build a more resilient, restorative relationship to our land and waters. There is, for example, much we have to learn in a fire-prone landscape from the original inhabitants, from the first peoples of this nation, of this region, of this land, who had highly sophisticated fire techniques, fire management techniques especially, and that's surely something that we'll be discussing in the days ahead. But we kick off this 28th year of Bioneers against the backdrop of a great deal of uncertainty and upheaval, marked not only by unprecedented climatic events, but by much more global turbulence than we've seen in generations. And let us not lose sight of the fact that the potential for deep positive transformation, for a new era based on clean energy, social justice, and awakened compassion is ready to be born out of this seeming chaos. In that light, I want to share with you a story about how my contact with some First Peoples recently provided me with some much-needed perspective. A few weeks ago, I had the great honor of being hosted by several members of the Navajo, hereafter I'll refer to as Diné, which is the word that how they prefer to be referred, which is the name of their peoples, and the Hopi Nations, on the rim of the Grand Canyon in the Four Corners region. The trip was part of a larger Bioneers partnership with the Colorado Plateau Intertribal Conversations Group. CPIC is a groundbreaking initiative that has, for the last 8 years, convened regional First Nations in dialogues and collaborations to both resist the ongoing destruction of extractive industries and to create a self-directed landscape and green economy. We spent some time in deep dialogue about a current collaboration between Bioneers and CPIC. In fact, you'll see some of the CPIC people at Bioneers over the weekend. And we're partnering with them and with our esteemed colleagues Tom Lindsay and Mari Margell of the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund to offer rights of nature legal trainings in the region and beyond. Under our current system, nature is property. It has no rights. We need to change the paradigm to one where nature has the intrinsic right to exist, persist, evolve and flourish, where people can stand legally on behalf of critters and rivers and ecosystems. This is something that First Peoples consider painfully obvious, but the rest of us have a lot of catching up to do on a philosophical level. I've spent time living with the Native American Amazonian peoples in Brazil, including the Ashaninka, thanks to an Invoking the Pause grant. But my trip to the Dene Nation was the first time in my adult life that I'd been welcomed onto a First Nations homeland in North America. During the trip, I asked several of our hosts what they thought about the tensions many people in the US were feeling around the Trump administration. To my consternation, most of these people with whom I spoke didn't seem terribly upset by Trump. Kit Carson, one person told me, now he was a real challenge. Carson, you'll recall, was a New Mexican mountain man and army officer noted for his savage campaigns in the 1800s to force the relocation of the Dene and Apaches to reservations. Columbus, another person echoed, now he was super problematic. Trump, they offered, was really just more of the same. These folks understood full well what a setback for most First Peoples and Americans in general this regime represents, but they really know how to take the long view. Then again, Columbus didn't have nukes. On our journey, we met an amazing Dene grandmother named Rosemary Williams. Rosemary has a farm outside of Tuba City, Arizona. She waters a flourishing farm of corn and squash and watermelon. She must be in her 70s, but she runs like she could be a 14-year-old girl. She waters her crop with about one flooding per year. That the rest is just filled with small water bottles. Rosemary took us through very proudly through her farm, and at one point drops down, picks up this giant gourd melon, crushes it to the ground, and offers it us all to taste, and it was delicious. And then I learned a little bit more about Rosemary's story, that when she was a little girl, the Bureau of Indian Affairs came to her home, took her away from her parents 9 months out of the year, put her into our foster home with a family outside of Los Angeles. But the way that she stayed connected to her culture was coming back every summer and tending the farm in the traditional ways with her grandfather. In these frontline communities that have often borne the brunt of the worst racism and injustice in our society, that our society could throw at them, there is, at least among the elders, people like Rosemary Williams, an inner core of extraordinary calm and a centered resilience. Their people survived an attempted genocide and have lived under brutal oppression for hundreds of years. And they have, as a result, developed a very long, broad view of the sweep of history. And the psychic anchor their long-lived traditions and highly sophisticated worldviews provide them makes them totally confident in their ability to outlast their oppressors and survive cataclysms. I'm not saying there's never a time to be in a hurry or to demand immediate change. Certainly, this time calls for that, because many of our challenges do require rapid responses. And much of what we will be discussing this weekend will be about mobilizing our resources and efforts to push forward here and now. But one of the main lessons I brought back from this journey is that these battles we are currently engaged in for healthy lands and waters and greater inclusivity and justice are struggles many indigenous peoples have been waging for generations. We have to understand that in quite a few cases, this will be a long-term, multi-generational endeavor. So yes, we must all work together for a better world today and rebuild after disasters and help those who need our help immediately, but also understand that we're in it for the long haul. Meanwhile, these people made it clear to me by their living example that we must never forget to love the earth and land and its bounty and the glorious magic of life as often as we can, even in the middle of crisis. They showed me that if we can cultivate a resilient sense of joy, we'll be much happier, and we will increase our odds of winning the struggles we must wage. So I thank you, Dene and Hopi elders, for your presence and your wisdom. And thank you, Bioneers. I wish you all a productive, inspiring, and as joyous a weekend as possible.